hello. Hello there.
Hello there.
To start off with, welcome to his talking then. I definitely did not set the title as Sonic Hero still.
Lamau.
It's updated now. I just opened it on my phone and I was like, that would have been awkward. But hey, it's done now, right?
Yeah.
We ain't playing Sonic Heroes, we're talking about a masterpiece. Yeah, pretty much a masterpiece, so I'm the Gel 2, also known as Geltion slash Jellywu slash the Dad Zone slash uh, James slash James slash James. You play on those Japanese cartoons again? Yeah, and this is my good friend here, Rebel Dragon 95.
Also known as Rebel, Reb, RD95, this.
Yo, these 80s is gone forever.
I know, right?
Yeah, so we maybe should be chatting about Yakuza 0 today. I mean, I'm gonna be doing other topics in the future. Rebel may or may not be here for some of them, depends on whether he hates himself enough to, because I can never see you wanting to do something like One Piece, but for video games I feel he'll be down. And the next topic for future episodes would be actually Pokemon retrospective, which is gonna be a wild one. I feel like there's a lot to say on Pokemon. So in this case, this is Yakuza 0. This is a weird case, because this is a franchise I've loved for a long time. But you, Rebel, it's like you just suddenly stumbled upon it.
Yeah.
Like,
this year is when I stumbled upon Yakuza.
yeah, because the thing is, I started back in 2010, so for reference, I knew about Yakuza back in the PS2 era. I am an OG for this. I am an old boy. And in this case, I specifically remember my friend, I'll use his name, he's not going to care, Craig, he brought his PS2 over, brought Yakuza, right? I was like, yo, this looks fun. Even though it had the English voices, which, give me a backup here on that we will never listen to the English voices.
Oh, yeah, never.
Yeah. And if they ever bring them back, I don't think I'd ever feel right. Looks a 7.
Stares at 7, stares at Judgment.
Stares at Fist of the North Star.
Yeah, stares at Fist of North Star.
Yeah.
At least that's already an existing anime which probably had an English dub already.
Oh, it did. It's just,
So,
it only had the first 39 episodes, which is quite strange. But no, yeah. In this case, he played a little bit. I was like, yo, this looks nice. And obviously, I don't know if you remember this, but like Yakuza was advertised over here as like a GTA clone. It was seen as the Japanese GTA, which if you don't bat an eye at, you think you could mistake it for that,
it
right?
looks very much like it. My introduction to Yakuza is very much different to what Gels was, because I was first exposed to Yakuza through the speedrun community of it, and then from there I then decided to play through some of the games, and by some of them I mean within the span of like five-ish months, 4 to 5 months, I played through 0 all the way to 6 and Judgment.
Yeah, Judgment you finished actually just this past week.
Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday.
Sunday? Thursday.
Thursday.
No, Thursday. That was it. I can't do days the whole week. Thursday.
Don't worry.
Sunday's tomorrow.
Yeah, it's that time. It's 2020. You don't remember what time of the year it is, but no, that's not even finishing like where I am with this. Like you just had a real swift blast through it. I may as well, since you just said that your history of the whole franchise, I may as well just go through the whole of mine. So obviously I've seen Yakuza 0, Yakuza 1. This is the English dub one. So a couple of years later, they show Yakuza 2 in the official PlayStation magazine. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, so show that. It's like, because I got delayed to come over here over 2 years, which has been the case for most of these, because they don't make the money, and then 0 came out, and then they make all money. Crazy how that happens, because they start releasing him over here naturally, which is to be expected once this becomes popular. But no, but then I kind of, you must know what I mean, where like you have that early teen edgy phase where you want to play GTA, you want to play Call of Duty, you want to play something violent, right? And with Yakuza being advertised as violent, Yakuza 3 comes out on my birthday, 2010. Now, it's a bit ironic because that one's like the dad simulator rather than the GTA clone, isn't it?
It is very much daddy simulator. You spend the first four. You spend 4 chapters and 1.5 at the end,
Mm-hmm.
basically doing things based around the orphanage that one of the main characters, Kiryu, runs.
And
There's a lot of going back and forth, talking to the children and dealing with their small kind of family life problems.
yeah, and obviously from there, because back then that was basically when you must know. I mean, it was you were kind of relying on your parents being like, yeah, sure, you can play that.
Yeah.
And so I didn't play 4 because until the university where I got good old CEX and they made me, do you ever had to buy a CEX account? Not buy a CEX account, but like sign up for one.
Yes.
But that's the exact game because they're like, yo, we won't sell this to you because it's an 18. I'm like, but I'm over 18. I don't see the issue. But we need to authorize you're over 18 by making you have an account. I have an ID, which is strange. So I started it. Beat Akiyama's bit, put it down because I got dropped it aside as push and escape because classic me plays on hard, like you, Mr. Rebel.
I played on easy mode because I wanted to have fun.
Yeah, we have fun in our own ways. But then I came back to the series just after uni because I was very much bored and decided, hey, I'm gonna play 4 finally. I played it, loved it. I was like, really did I like it more than 3 or is nostalgia holding me up? So I played through 3 and I'm like, man, this series is good. I wish more of the games got localized. Looks at the PSN, Yakuza 0, and I'm like, oh. And as you would say, as Anakin Skywalker says, this is where the fun begins.
Exactly.
And I just basically, from November 2017 to December 2017, I played Yakuza 0, then Kiwami, took a 2-week break, then played 5, because I got Part 5 on PS3. Had a blast, burnt myself out, as you do, because me and you, as we'll soon explain, have very different playstyles for RPGs. Then I played them more or less as they came out, release order, with 6, then Kiwami 2, then Judge, and lagging behind a few months just to pick them up on sale. And yeah, managed to get Rebel over here into the series just in time for 7, which is out 13th of November. Do you know what else is out on 13th of November?
Oh, there's another game, isn't there? I can't remember what it is.
Kingdom Hearts.
Oh yeah, Melody of Memories.
Yeah, I'm sitting there like, I'm probably going to blaze through that first, just for the sake of getting it out of the way, because it's the shorter game.
Yeah, I think that's probably the play.
And I'm more likely to encounter Cage spoilers than Yakuza spoilers, because this game's been out for a year. And plus, I'm not going to spoil it here because anyone actually cares. But spoilers for 7 are already quite abundant. But anyway, I think we should get on with actually discussing the actual main entry that we're going to be talking about today, Yakuza 0, I would say.
Yeah.
So, also, I didn't mention this, but I have also played Dead Souls in the past week. Do not play it. Please, for the love of God, do not play it. Just watch the cutscenes and the karaoke online. It's much better. But anyway, where would be a good point to start with Yakuza 0? the easiest place to start with is actually the intro. That's a good staple of most of these games. They have a banging opening.
They always have good intros, and usually the intros are full of spoilers for clips throughout the game, and usually thrown so out of context that they're not even spoilers. You're just like, oh, hello, and you don't really pay attention to it while you're just rocking out to the good ass song that's in the background.
Yeah, because the first thing the very much the one I think of is, we'll obviously mention the specifics later, but when Margiman's in his final boss gauntlet, they showed one of him sliding through that.
Yes, they do.
And there's one of obviously there's loads of the early ones, because They shove like 6 or 7 from that like 17-minute cutscene from
Yes, they
Majima.
do. Yeah,
Like
they shove a
the
lot
first thing
from.
they show off is like the friggin' sorry, the like boob grab. And I was like,
Yes.
you're like, oh, okay, we know what game we're getting, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not. You also get all the like, oh, is Kiryu bad guy? No, he's good boy. Yes, you get that. It's a good theme. Did you actually know that the English ones are completely different from the Japanese?
I didn't actually know that. Are you aware that the box arts are different in the Western Japanese and Chinese releases?
Not Chinese, but I knew them in Japanese and English because.
The Chinese ones have Lao Gui on the front in his Chinese model because he has a
Mhm.
different model in China.
Yeah, like if you actually noticed, most of the Yakuza games do have aggressively different art styles in the US. It kind of does irritate me a little
Yeah.
bit. But nowadays they've kind of got into the fashion of mimicking them, like they did with Zero and Kiwami,
Yeah.
or they just have them as a reversible cover. Like
Yeah.
Seven's got Seven's doing a steelbook where it's got the US one on the front and then the Japanese one interior, which is lovely. Judgment Judgment have the Japanese one interior, and
Yeah.
etc. etc. But yeah, like it was strange to finally get a Yakuza game that matched the box art, which kind of probably coincided with the change in team handling it, because up through 5, I think it's 5 or Dead Souls, one of the two. It would make sense that it was Zero because Zero very much translates differently and feels like it's written completely differently. But like,
Yeah.
it
Zero
feels.
feels completely different to every game that came out before it, really,
Mm,
with a lot of things.
yeah, because it ended up having. I may not be correct on this, but from what I've heard, it's the because it's a. Believe they have the translators who do the later Persona games doing it, which really does make sense because the remaster collection and Zero onwards definitely have a lot more humor in them and that lot of quirkiness that the newer Persona stuff has.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a lovely start. It's simply because I can think of many lines that Kiryu says that like just you wouldn't think of him saying in like 3. He's very monotone there, but in 0 they gave him a nice flesh out.
Yeah. In 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 Zero, he feels very much like he is a like because he's early 20s or under 20 or something in Zero, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he's quite young. This is
He is
obviously
like
meant to
really
be.
young, so I feel like them making him more kind of more kind of outspoken and more willing to act and more and he's more willing to throw a punch half the time in 0
Hmm.
than he is in some of the other games.
Oh, for sure. And before we start talking about like actual content and story, I mean, first of all, thing is like Zero looks phenomenal, and I'm obviously jumping from 3 and 4, which are very bland as Yakuza games. 2-0 is so much color.
Yes,
Like,
and from what I'm aware of, it even looked solid on the PlayStation 3 version as well.
it's a lot to do with the new engine just rendering things quite well,
Yeah,
and you just, especially with some of those cutscenes, like when Kiryu's outside the car getting his money for the good old empty lot bit at the start, it just gives it that very distinct vibe that none of the other games match. It makes
yeah,
Zero feel it's in isolation.
yeah,
You obviously graphically, character models look fantastic. You do have a few texture things here and there,
and a
which are an
bit of
issue.
pop in, but nothing really that would, nothing really that would ruin the
Mm.
experience.
For me, it's like obviously played on base PS4 and Rebel played on a PC Steam version. Like, I'm sure if you
Yes,
blast that up to maximum on Steam, it doesn't matter. That all looks lovely. And
yeah,
also you gotta remember, Yakuza 0 is a 2015 game. It's hard to not see texture issues after looking at things like Resident Evil 3 remake and Final Fantasy 7 remake, which are just ridiculous.
well, even games within its own series, like the Dragon Engine games, where
Yes.
they completely upped the graphical style. But even then, those games have their own issues. But with Zero just always looked solid and
Consistent.
inconsistent, even if there are slight kind of
Oh,
drops in very, very minor places.
yeah, that's like the first thing you notice when you're like, because it's so colourful, and it's just like, you feel like you're in for like you're in like a giant living, breathing world, because you compared to like earlier entries, even in 5, you just have a lot of NPCs walking around, a lot of interactable things. You start making it feel very much a big game, which is the big message that Zero wants to set out to you at the start. And
Yeah.
this is even before you've even really done anything. You just notice all these little things.
Well, the
Aside from that,
first cutscene of you walking of like you with the loan shark and then walking into the city, the first thing you see is just an abundance of people walking around and doing things,
hmm
and it just makes just the way all the Yakuza games have built their open worlds just make them feel like so much more open and alive than a lot of other open world games where it's just empty for miles and miles until you get to a city where it's crowded.
yeah,
But in Yakuza, no matter where you go, there are people everywhere. You can't interact with all of them, but they're still there, walking around, just doing daily things, and it
which
makes the world feel so much nicer to just go through.
which is a feat in itself because this is a world you'll be in every game.
Yeah,
You are there over and over.
yeah,
It doesn't ever really get old. You get a little bit of like, you don't really interact with everything every game. You just see, oh, this is different. This is different. Like,
yeah. That's
obviously, this game has the district where the Millennium Tower will eventually be. It just has little tiny different things. It even has the temple, which is absent from every other game. It's just all these little things that make Kamurocho feel different. Because even in Judgment, I think you'll notice when you've played that, because it's a continuity thing of the world. It makes it feel it's living and breathing. Because Zero, there's nothing, no little Asia or nothing. But you go all the way through Judgment. There's Millennium Tower. There's all these little, that big shopping center, or where the restaurants are, and then you have that.
Kamurocho Hills is there, but
hmm
you can't go into it. But it's still there from Yakuza
Yeah,
4 and 5.
and you have like where that Chinatown was, where it's been burnt through in 6 months,
Yeah,
and it just makes it feel like a living, breathing world. And Zero, especially, just sets the precedent for that because the sheer amount of freedom you have, it it's a great setting, and it just never gets old. But obviously, that's like not you can't have a good world and rely on it. Otherwise, you become, in my opinion, Assassin's Creed Origins.
yeah.
But in,
I do feel like the Yakuza games do it better because when you know the map from when you've played a majority of the games, it like the fact that you're familiar with your surroundings as well makes every game like very very much approachable if you say only played one or two of them and you want to play another one.
absolutely, and the
And
same,
Kamurocho is always approachable because it's in every single game.
absolutely. And if you go like play a couple and you have a tiny tweak, like obviously no Millennium Tower in this game, you're like, oh, this is a new area. I'm interested, and that is one of the first things you do. The first thing the game does, pretty much after that cutscene, because it wants to introduce Nishiki, and the way it
Yes.
does it is just by slowly walking you through Kamurocho, just getting you used to the engine, how impressive the game is, and especially for what is a cross-generational title. We've got to remember this is a PS3 game at, at heart, and that's partially why the textures are an issue at times, because it's a PS3 game that can't handle much. But you look at it and you're walking through that new area, and you're like, this is different. This is new. I'm interested. The game just sits you down in there, and what's the first thing the game does? It decides to play karaoke.
Yeah.
And you start to realize, oh, this is a game. This is a statement. The game throws down a statement. You have that opening cutscene of before this game starts with the wild, oh, this is a crazy ride. You have that start cutscene, which is very, very serious crime drama. And then Yakuza puts his foot on the door and goes, we are a serious crime drama. Have some karaoke.
I think that's where Zero actually, like, the intro of Zero is so well structured, because what it starts with is after the first couple of cutscenes. So in the first couple of cutscenes, Kiryu is getting money back from someone who owes money, and he kind of beats him up, takes the money back, and leaves. Then he goes talks to the loan shark, and then you have the cutscene where he walks away. And the first part of the game, the instructions it gives you are find Nishikiyama, which is your friend. And you go, and the first thing the game does is teaches you how to fight. Then afterwards, you go walking, and then you play karaoke. And the game just straight away you realize that that Yakuza 0 just wants you to have fun, but also understand that these guys just want to just be themselves and be goofy or be whatever. And especially if you pick the song Judgment, if I remember that's what it's called, yes. And you see the cutscene of them all dressed up in the 80s rock style, jamming on the stage.
With Kashiwagi in the back.
With Kashiwagi on the back on the keyboard, which loads of people miss.
I did actually as well until my second playthrough.
It's just such a brilliant tonal opening for the game before it really throws you into real kind of crime thriller Yakuza drama. And it just makes... And the one thing that Zero tries to do throughout the entire game, because it affects one of the other games in the series, is it tries to solidify the relationship between really two of the main characters of the story, which is Kiryu and Nishiki. Like, the first few chapters, especially with Kiryu, before you get into the meat of the story, there's a lot of scenes and walking and stuff and interactions that you get between those two characters. Because a lot of the game is about them just being themselves, which really kind of makes so many cutscenes in this game and so many story elements work.
Yeah, it really does. Like, because obviously there's two ways to play. Actually, I will retract that. There's three ways to play Yakuza games. You can just sit there, blast through the story, have the serious crime drama, and it works. You can also mess around and have some of the silly stuff. It works. You can go out your way and become a real estate manager and a cabaret club manager, 100% them, and still have a blast. It gets crazier the more you go through it. The side stuff, obviously, the side stuff's pretty much non-canon, outside of minor things, but it's also just it also helps to complement the world. But at the same time, if you want to just play for the story, you're going to have a wonderful time. But the game dips your toes into karaoke, literally showing the bond between Kiryu and Nishiki. And it goes, these two are bros. And it makes you believe it.
Yeah, that's actually, talking about the side content, in a lot of the side content in this game, if you really just play through the story, especially you only get kind of one side of the character. By doing some of their side content and looking at some of their sub-stories, you get to see a lot more of how each of the characters, both Kiryu and Majima, who we'll get to, react to situations which they're put into, be it goofy, serious, or whatever. And that's where you really get to see kind of the little minor touches to their character. And when you get to story elements where the game wants you to care, because you've been doing because of side content and how the game's written and how the game is kind of themed and toned, you care about the story elements because you care about your character. Because the game is very, very good at making you care about things that are happening to your character.
Which is something is fundamental for the Kiwami remake, and especially later games where it's like you've got attached to these characters that you've been on the journey with, and it really sells the journey.
Yeah.
But again, you go through the karaoke, and that's the point that makes you realise this is a game that means business. Not many games would have the flashy stuff like that from the get-go. It would try to hold on to the super serious persona, but this one just goes, hey, have fun, and you know you're gonna have fun. But then, ironically enough, after that, the tension goes through the roof, and it honestly complements and adds to why I love the opening of Zero so much. Because you get introduced to the three, I think they're lieutenants.
Yes.
Uh,
You get introduced to Kuze, Awano, and Sugasawa.
hmm And
Or Shibusawa. However you pronounce
I
them.
think it's Shibusawa, but it doesn't particularly matter.
Shibusawa, I just looked
Yeah.
it up because.
Okay, thank you. And you just get some incredible tension. Any
Yeah.
cutscene you get in, obviously, if you're watching, you likely know what makes the plot here tick. But obviously, Kiryu at this point, he's being framed for the this whole uh, murder of the guy who was taking the money from. But this is in a grander scheme to push Kazuma out of the family. And don't get confused, Kazuma is Kiryu's foster father, not Kiryu. He's not related to Kiryu Kazuma. But he's also a part of the Kazuma family in the Tojo clan. It is a bit confusing, but that's more of a translation thing. So the whole thing of there is they're trying to get Kazuma. I think is it Futo Kazuma?
You mean his
father?
foster father?
Yeah.
It's Shintaro.
Shintaro. I get those names very weird. Shintaro. Yeah. So they're trying to get him out. So then there'll be a kind of a position up for grabs. It's basically you could summarize it as three babies want pay rise.
Yeah, basically the entire center of the plot of Yakuza 0 is about this little plot of land called the Empty Lot, where at the start of the game, Kiryu beats up the guy he's trying to get the loan money back from. And then when he leaves him, somebody assassinates him. And then because the area becomes a crime zone, the complications of buying it becomes extreme. So basically, the lieutenants want Kiryu to take the fall for them. Basically.
Yeah, so if they expel him from well, not even expel, if they get rid of him and blame it on Kazuma, Kazuma gets expelled from basically his branch gets dissociated with the Dojima family. It's all very, very particular Japanese Yakuza politics and so on. Well, I don't say politics is the right word. Shenanigans.
Yeah.
But yeah, if they get rid of him, they're cleaning their hands of it and they can go, give us the land. Because that's the thing, this game piques your interest because it's just so abrupt and upfront and emotional. But the thing that really hits is you don't even know what the empty lots are for. But if you've played any of the other games, the moment you clock that empty lot is essential to the building of the Millennium Tower, it makes it feel way more important than just a little empty lot. And it also just helps to tie in so many things, which helps just make it feel so much better. And you go through you just go through some various little character building moments, just understanding and tutorials before you just go back to the Dojima family and you have one of Rebel's favourite cutscenes.
Yeah, so basically Kiryu, when he gets asked to take the fall for the frame, goes no, says I'll find out what happens, leaves the Dojima family HQ. Then he goes back the day later when he gets called, and Kuze, who's there, basically demands that Kiryu does take the fall, and then Kiryu goes, no, I'm going to walk away from the Dojima family, I'm going to renounce being a Yakuza until I find out what happened. Obviously, Kuze refuses, because you can't just walk away from being a Yakuza without some kind of sacrifice or something, which is what Kiryu wants. Eventually, Kiryu convinces him, and basically, Kuze tells, I can't remember exactly what he says, but he tells the other Yakuza thugs he has with him to do something to Kiryu. Then Kiryu goes, wait a second, you can't do that to someone inside your own family. And then Kuze goes, oh, but you're no longer part of the family, you're now a civilian. And then Kiryu basically says, "Oh, really though," and just beats everyone up. And there's an entire long set, what we'll probably refer to as a set piece, because generally, we won't call it, because generally fights in most games are kind of a one room thing, but in Yakuza, fights, especially the long fights, are either referred to as long battles or set pieces because they go on for quite a while and have multiple parts within them.
They're like gauntlets, if anything.
Yeah, they're more like gauntlets where you beat up a bunch of enemies, you do a transition, you beat up a bunch of enemies, do a transition until you get to the end of the corridor.
The best bit
Basically.
is you actually have missed the part where Kuze actually gets angry at Kiryu for hitting back, and Kiryu's just like, he's like, "Why are you hitting your fellow Yakuza?" And Kiryu's like, "You just expelled me."
You just expelled
And
me. I'm
Kuze is just like,
now.
oh no."
Yeah.
So you go for that
So
first
Kiryu
gauntlet.
basically beats through the entire Dojima family who's present in the HQ until he gets to Kuze, where he then decides to beat on Kuze until I believe it's Iwano and actually Dojima himself shows up
Dojima
and
basically
basically
gone,
forces Kuze to give him his little finger for his failure.
and Kiryu asks to be expelled, and Dojima's just like, "Why is a civilian asking to be expelled?"
Yeah. Why is a civilian still here?
And with obviously with Kuze having being the early boss, he's quite enjoyable boss because he's quite how to put it, he's quite aggressive, but he also leaves a lot of openings because he goes for frontal attacks all the time.
Yes, in most fights in the Yakuza series, especially in Zero, if you can hit an enemy in the back, they can't block you until they turn around. And especially in Zero, in Zero, a lot of your heavy attacks actually have the ability to break guard and then stagger opponents, which then gives you further opportunity to do more damage or start punching again, which is probably one of the bigger changes in how Zero works, because in the games that came before it, 3, 4, and 5, your combat options are much more limited than they are in Zero, in comparison to how Kiryu is. Because in 3 you only have Kiryu, but then in 4 and 5 you have multiple characters to play as. And basically, the way they made combat have more depth in Zero is they actually gave Kiryu and the other character Majima multiple fighting styles, which are full of references to other fighters that you've played as throughout the series, which is very, very, very cool and a very, very neat way of basically giving references or keeping their fighting styles alive while also improving them and adding nuance or basically specializations to them.
Yeah, especially as if you're going in release order of playing these, this would have been after 5, and you can absolutely see that in this game. But it's two different ways of seeing it in this. We'll explain Margin when we actually get to the Margin section. But for Kiryu, you start off with it's Brawler. I always forget the names. It's
Brawler, yeah.
Brawler, Rush, and Beast. If you finish the business side story for the real estate, you get Dragon, which is basically his complete old one, but redone up in the Zero engine. So you start with Brawler, which is kind of your default, with that one just being a more premature version of Dragon. It's a nice just balance, because these three, for Kiryu especially, are balanced ones. Because you obviously have speed for Rush, strength for Beast, and balance for Brawler. But then you also have the double edge on that, of that you have Brawler obviously being a budget version of Dragon, reference to the old ones, because he even has a couple of his hits of his combos are very exactly the same. So you get familiar with it. With Beast, it's very much a reference to Saejima, who...
Yeah, Beast has a lot of power, very, very good with weapons, but it's very, very slow, and its dodging isn't very good. Rush kind of is very much an opposite, where you're really, really fast, your movement's really, really fast, your dodging's really, really good, but you don't cause a lot of hit stun. But to contrast that, the hits you get in are really, really quick, and you can fast cancel out of basically everything when you get the right abilities unlocked.
Rush in this case is one of those ones. It's incredible in concept, and it actually works. It feels like it works better in Kiwami because
Yes.
those enemies behave a lot differently. In this game, Brawler and Beast honestly just get the job done, whereas Rush doesn't particularly. It's obviously very useful for interchanging into combos, but if you're walking into a fight with Rush on your own, it's not going to be as good as the
Yeah,
others.
Rush has parry, which Rush has a parry when you unlock a certain ability on its skill tree, which makes it very, very useful for a lot of fights, because just being able to switch quickly and then parry someone when they are doing a big move at you and ending up behind them means you can then switch back into Brawler or Beast and start hitting them again for free, which is kind of shows the kind of specializations of each of the fighting styles. It's not as it's for Kiryu. It's not as prevalent as the other character you play as, because Kiryu's fighting styles are all based on punching people, because that's what his forte is. They're all based on big damage, big fast,
And then,
without much kind of thought anywhere else.
and this is before even taking into account some of the absolutely craziness that the Yakuza combat just holds. Because
Yeah,
we're not even talking about the heat moves. The heat moves in Zero are fantastic. There's such
yeah.
good
There are
variety.
so many. There are so many. Like I mentioned earlier about guard breaks being more of a thing in Zero. There's even a heat move which is basically designed to break guard, where if someone's guarding in like your face and you have enough heat gauge, you can just grab their face and just hit them for free.
Mm. And they're just done in such a way that no matter how often you do these heat moves, they're still so satisfying. Even the
Yeah, they
basic
always feel
ones.
good.
Like obviously some are more entertaining than others, and they've obviously got a bit more silly as the games have come on. Like if you look at the threes, they're very brutal but not silly. Like this game, you bowl people over, or you just
Yeah,
get anything. Like there's a lot of environmental ones as well, which really add a lot of depth because it means if I'm fighting here, I can do this, which is something that the series has definitely built upon later in the series compared to earlier, and like judgment is obviously irrelevant to this case, but like that's just showing of the evolution because obviously you can do things like being on swings and just kicking them off. But this
yeah,
game it kind of is the one that goes, yeah, we've got a lot here, and obviously some of them are references to old ones, some of them are just the exact same ones, some of them are remixes,
yeah.
but
Nearly every single Yakuza game basically usually have a in terms of your base set of finishing moves, or they're usually called essence of finishing for your first level up. Your essence of finishing abilities in all the Yakuza games usually give you access to the same few heat actions, and then obviously when you go through your trainings in the masters and you unlock more and more of your abilities, that's when you start getting more and more of the creative ones, and those are the ones that feel so good when you unlock them, because there are just so many to go through, and you can go through playthroughs without seeing like so many of them, and then when you see a new one suddenly you're like, oh,
yeah, and that's the thing. Like when I replayed as a Zero for the second time back in May, having been basically really wanting to, having seen you playing through it, and there's just so many, especially the weapons, because I never really actually used weapons until my second playthrough, and you realize, oh my goodness, God, these are good, and these are crazy.
yeah,
But then you get that's just the tip of it. It's just one of those things where the combat never gets old. Sure, there are some enemy types that are a little bit more annoying to deal with, but there's always a solution. There's always a fun way to win. It's never just it's never a spam. It's never just a spam the same thing over and over until you just get done with it, and that keeps it fresh. It keeps the pace pretty good, and we've only really covered a chapter 1 and a bit of chapter 2 there.
Yeah,
That's the
basically,
crazy
chapter one
thing.
and chapter two basically introduces you to all of Kiryu's combat, and then throws like a huge bit of story right at the end of chapter two, because you spend most of chapter two looking into a mysterious agency called the Tachibana Real Estate,
Mm.
because you find out that Tachibana wants to talk to you, and basically you then go into his building after you have to give a bunch of homeless people some alcohol, then they'll give you information about it
Did
in
you
a
give?
really long fetch quest.
Did you end up giving them the special gold champagne?
Oh yeah, if you give him the gold champagne, you get a trophy.
Yeah, there's a lot of most missable trophies in this one. They're really random as well. But actually, whenever we go through each chapter, I'll actually tell you the missable ones because they're just really, really obscure. But they're
Yeah,
really funny. But yeah, you meet Tachibana and it's just like it gives such a different twist on it.
yeah,
I know like obviously it's Yakuza 3. It's about money for a property. Well, that's crazy. But this one, the stakes are so different. The stakes are so they're personal in a different way.
yes,
They're personal because Kiryu is being framed. In 3, it's directly affecting him. This one, Kiryu wants to prove himself wrong. He wants to he just wants to escape.
yeah.
The other one he wants to resolve. And that's just a different character. It's not story. It's a different
Arc.
character. Thank you. That's the one. And this one, you leave it, and that's another one of the great things that Zero does. Every 2 chapters, you will swap between Kiryu Kazuma and Goro Majima, the lovable Goro Majima, and
Yeah,
they
basically
will
every two
always.
chapters ends on a cliffhanger.
And that cliffhanger, it always leaves you wanting more. For the one
Yes.
in Kiryu's case, you meet Tachibana, you know something's a little bit strange. Like, you don't know whether to trust him or not. And then he just pulls his hand across. I know it's for dramatic effect. And then you see all the lights go out except the building they're in. You go, this guy means business. And you're interested. Because you feel attached to Kiryu at this point because you've gone through a lot of stuff. You've gone through a lot of stuff in like 4 or 5 hours a game at most. And the game leaves you wanting more. And so what does it do? It goes, bye. But it goes straight to Majima. And I'm a big fan of this 2-2-2-2 format because it doesn't get tiresome. It keeps it fresh. It keeps the pacing really good.
Yeah,
Because
in the other Yakuza games, mainly 4 and 5, where there are multiple playable characters, you play each character's part all in a row, and every character's part is basically assumed to be taking place either at the same time or one after the other. But in Zero's case, with the switching every 2, it feels so much nicer because whenever you end a 2-character thing after the first 4 chapters, it'll give you a last time on Dragon Ball Z when you go back to playing as that character.
it even has a
And bring you
special
up to
music.
speed with what happened. Yeah, it even does have special music, and it basically puts you back into the same place because it always ends where your cliffhanger was. But then when it jumps into the gameplay, it's a while later, and then because of that, you're then going, oh, I wonder what happened, and then the game spends the first few cutscenes kind of making references and like adding more to the mystery, which you then get I can't think of the word, but you get the satisfaction of finding out what happens later on in that chapter where you go back to them, which is it's such a good way of like keeping engagement of your player
I agree, and
over just kind of basically forcing them to do everything at once.
I agree. I honestly love that way more than Zero because it's also a big thing, especially in 5. I think you may have got this. Did you ever feel rusty when you went back to a character at the end of their story?
Yes.
Like, let's say, we'll use 5 as an example because you play as Kiryu at the start. When you went back to Kiryu in part 5, did you feel rusty playing him?
Yeah.
Because it's just really weird. You're just like, you've gone through so many styles and you're like, processing. Whereas this one keeps you rotating enough to the point where you don't forget. even with the amount of styles there are, you don't really forget. And that's just a
Yeah.
good strength. It's just a good pacing. The game, the game never drags its feet. The only time the game feels remotely slow is in the second swaps because they're trying to introduce all the side content. But again, at the same time, those also just sprinkle enough of cliffhangers, enough of plot twists, enough character interactions to keep you engaged. And speaking of character interactions, engaging content, Majima.
The 17-minute cutscene.
Yeah, you, you finished part two. You haven't? Did you? Did you?
You
Did
haven't. You have a boss fight with like Oda, where the game actually introduces you to bosses with weapons and really gives you an idea of how much damage that they
Yeah,
can do to you. You
that
then
one.
get Tachibana basically showing off that he has some power over the area. You then get flung to a cabaret club with 17 minutes of of meeting probably one of the most fan favorite characters in a series I've ever seen.
Before you mention that, I just want to mention you said about the Oda fight. That is actually a wonderful tutorial because it just subtly goes. There's loads of weapons. There's loads of things here to throw. The game wants you to use beast mode. It wants you to figure it out. It doesn't. It doesn't just outright say, "Hey, use beast mode." It just leaves it there for your imagination. You don't have to.
Yeah,
But it's great game
because what
design.
the game does in that fight in particular, it starts you right by a bunch of furniture. And what Beast does, when you're by anything that you can pick up, if instead of having to press circle and doing the slow pickup animation like Kiryu has to do in every other stuff, in Beast, if you press square, he picks it up and attacks in one motion. So you can basically go straight into damage if you're aware that Beast can pick up items. So, and if you do happen to be in Beast, because at that point you've just unlocked Beast in that chapter, so you're probably using it, trying to get used to it, or like playing around with it, and then you then get a boss fight where you start by furniture and you swing and you pick up a sofa instantly. You're going, oh wait, this is what this can do.
Yeah.
And then the game basically Oda doesn't like what I like about the first few fights in Zero. In other games, bosses, even the early bosses, have so much HP that it becomes really, really slow to fight them. But then Zero kind of fixed that by giving bosses kind of HP based on where you are in the story, which is so much better for the style, like for the style of RPG that it's trying to be, where it's trying to teach you how to play.
No.
Because it's a prequel as well. I feel like they did try and make it a good starting off point for people as well.
They definitely did because there's a few games, more so 4 and 5, which are a bit culprit of just having very chunky health bars. Where this game, most bosses don't have more than 3.
Yeah.
And that's really pushing it because like, I think maybe they're all. I don't really remember how many they have, but honestly, the number feels irrelevant because this is the one game where stats, numbers, money mean nothing. Like, you level up using your money in this game, so which is how you unlock all your items. Sorry, your abilities. So it's a really good starting off point.
Yeah. So, where were we? Majima. Right, chapter 3 is what we're on now, right?
The long cutscene, as you would say.
Yes.
So in that one, you basically just getting. It's like you're watching a bit of like a random police drama, or just any drama in general. You're following the journey of these two drunkards from a company going to the cabaret. I think it's not a cabaret club. I think it's a cabaret exactly. There's a difference, I believe.
Yeah, it's not a hostess club.
Mm-hmm.
It is a hostess club, but it's a upper market one. It's the posh one, basically.
The one you go to for the evening, rather than a
Yes.
quick half an hour.
Yeah.
And you just end up going through that journey. They go upstairs, obviously, and you have them bringing the drinks. You don't even know what's going on. You're very it was very out of place, but because it's such a shift, it matches because you've obviously gone to a new part. So you obviously you're keeping attention because what is this? What am I to expect? And you just see a little kerfuffle up front. Kerfuffle, if you're not British, means fight.
Yeah, that was very much a British term throughout there.
That was a very British accent you put there, buddy. But yeah, there's this guy there who will become a little bit of a recurrence in Martimer's second part, where he's just messing about. And he's like groping the girls, misbehaving pretty much. And Goro Majima pops out, and if you've not played any other game, you're oblivious. But if you've played if you played 1 through 4, 3 and 4, 3, 4 and 5, you may notice it. He's very much calmed down by then. But if you know the PS2 ones, Majima is crazy. And he pops up here, tuxedo, ponytail, still the eye patch. But he's calm. He's incredibly calm, composed, and they use it wonderfully, a tutorial, as him basically chaperoning the guy out. Just like, because one of the ones he'll pop up behind you as a heat move, is that just teaching you how to use his thug style. But yes. they use the way they do it is he pops up behind and gives him a towel. Whereas in the other, when he uses it in proper combat, he'll use a knife. It's really subtle, it's really nice, it buys in, it really brings you into the belief that Majima is running the club, that he's professional, and you love it, because you go through all of that for that payoff, and it's wonderful. And that's just the start of Majima.
Yeah.
Because you end up like just getting a lot of exposition dump. You just get a lot of why he's there. It's told slowly, and you just start to understand it. Like you start going, because you go, why is he working at a club? Especially if you play the other games. Because if you played some of the other games, like especially 1, 2, you'd be like, this Majima would never restrain himself to a club. He hasn't got that composure. He just goes crazy. And this game is obviously before all that, so the way they do it here is just by explaining this situation. They do reference 4 and actually show the exact cutscene from 4, but muddled up a little bit to show it. But they show Majima losing his eye. They show that he's there as a punishment, and then it actually starts to make sense. He wouldn't want to be in a cabaret willingly. For story purposes, we'll mention the cabaret club later.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's there, and he wants to get back into the Tojo clan because of 2 reasons. That's the life he knows, and 2 for his brother Saejima, who he feels he's let down because, spoilers for 4, Majima kind of took the fall because he was unable to stop Saejima from trying to kill people, because Majima knew it was
he knew it was all a setup.
Yeah,
he found out that it was all a setup.
And they punished him by taking his eye and locking him up for a year. And then after all that, he still had the mental willpower. This is why I don't think he's crazy, because he had the mental willpower to survive that. He has strong balls.
Yeah.
And he goes, I want back in. And Shimano, who is the head of the Shimano family, which is what Majima is part of, and eventually takes over when Shimano dies. Spoilers. But he is basically doing it as his opportunity to get into the next part. And you just go, okay. And you meet Sagawa, who has the most punchable face you'll ever see.
Yeah, he's basically Majima's keeper. And he's a character who's there for you to hate him. He does a really, really good job of making you just hate his guts completely.
Yeah, and the first time the game actually does that is when Saga was like, oh, you only have X amount left to pay. Oh, sorry, did you say that? I meant this amount. And you're like, yeah, he is a prick. You know he is. he is just using Majima, and Majima doesn't really have a way out of it, you feel. Even when he suddenly offers in chapter 4, after showing how trapped he is, a way out by saying, kill Makoto Makan... I can't say her surname, but go name Makoto.
Makoto Makimura.
Thank you, Makamura. And even then, you're doubting it. Because you think, will he actually? Were you thinking that as well?
Yes.
Because I feel, when I heard that, it felt like a trap. It felt like, because when I first thought, I obviously could never clock the connection between her and the empty lot until
the game told me.
For me, it was until the game kind of showed Sarah, and then Kiri was like, we need to go to the... When Tachibana was like, I need to go to Sodenbori, I was like, duh. Empty lot person there. Okay, it's her. But, yeah, because even then you're like, what is this? Who are you? Why are you needed? And this is, after introducing so much of Majima, because Majima is in absolute contrast to Kiryu. Because Kiryu is just a very, I won't say grounded, but his combat styles are very by the norm. Because you have like strong, light, medium, don't you?
Yeah.
But Majima is like the special styles, because his thug one is just him with a knife. It's a mimicry of his Dragon and Dojima one.
You're thinking of Mad Dog with Shimano style.
Sorry, that's what I meant.
Thug is basically Majima's equivalent to Brawler, where it's just kind of a basic fighting style that can do everything.
Yeah, I can't believe I got the names mixed up. But yeah, it's the kind of the Kiryu equivalent of his future style.
Yeah, it just doesn't have the knife quite yet.
Mm-hmm. It does sometimes, I think. You can, in some heat moves...
You can get the knife as an equipable weapon. It's just that when you unlock the what the game refers to as the legend style, or Mad Dog of Shimano, he has a version of the Dragonfire Dagger, which is what it's called, that can't break.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Unlike the one which you can get from the... I think you can get a version of it from the... from somewhere else, and it can break.
Yeah, and the styles that Majima gets, Thug, he gets Slugger, which is him with a baseball bat, which is very much a reference to Shinada from 5, but also a reference to future Majima, because there's many cutscenes you see him with a bat in Kiwami, or future game, well, Kiwami 1 more so.
And in 4.
Yeah.
Because you meet him at the batting station with Saijima in 4.
Yeah, and it's a style that also teaches you about weapons, because the game doesn't doesn't abruptly go, hey, you should use weapons. It just gives Majima a permanent weapon. It's not the strongest, but it teaches you how strong weapons are. It teaches you how their advantages are, like stunning enemies. And then you also have the... what do you name that style? I always call it the break stance style.
It's Breaker.
Okay,
it's called Breaker.
Where he just does flip kicks. And just on the floor.
He break dances on people.
Which is just your wacky, fun one. And I personally do find Majima's so wacky and so fun, because it's so different. Especially, like, even if you've played all the other games, Majima's styles are so interesting and so experimental that you will find something in them to like. And all the heat moves, especially Majima's, are so wonderful. If you actually do the training, which is what each style has, because they have respective training which gives you better heat moves. And with Majima, one of his ones for Breaker is you actually take two enemies, push one onto the other, one falls over, and one that's behind you, you sweep your leg backwards. And you know how Majima has those like long things on his feet?
Yeah.
Yeah, he kicks someone right in the balls of them from behind.
I think another good one for Breaker is the one where he spins around a person, kicking everyone around them, and then like throwing the initial person that he grabbed down.
Mm-hmm.
That's another cool heat move.
Yeah, he's full of them. It's just they're so wonderful. And yeah, he's a joy to play as, and I feel like he's in complete contrast to Kiryu deliberately, because not even just the combat. It's like his story is very not even low key. It's just it feels a lot less drama and intense. Because Kiryu is very intense at the start, and really throughout, whereas Marshall just kind of bubbles up and boils over towards the end. But it is also even shown in the nature of the side content, because
Yes.
Kiryu's side content is even more like not intense but like lively, because his sub stories are really wacky. You have various ones like the ones you will encounter early on when he's wearing the black suit, which looks lovely in my opinion. Is that you get the one where you meet the dominatrix. You'll have Finding Dragon Quest for the kid, even though it's called Agakure Quest, I believe. Pocket Circuit Racing. You'll have
Steven Spielberg
and Michael Johnson, sorry, Magic Johnson.
Magic Johnson.
Where you got to protect him from zombies, which is quite ironic. But then you also get just various little, like being the film producer, you just get all these wacky things. It's really high energy. And just like, what the hell is going on? Whereas Majima, you get the odd one here and there, like when you meet on the bridge someone pretending to be a statue, because that's like a performance thing. They're a lot more relatable and down to earth, because you have one where he has to pretend to be someone's girlfriend, or help someone propose through the crossword. Did you try that one?
I think so.
Yeah, they're all so more relatable and just like low key. Like he's settled down. It kind of feels really nice in contrast, and that's another strength of Zero. Just how the sub stories, if you like them or not, they're so interesting and they're so uninvasive. They're not invasive at all. You can just do whatever you want.
Yeah, because because usually you run into them more with Majima, because Sotenbori is a much smaller map than Kamurocho is for Kiryu. You end up just kind of stumbling into sub-stories a lot more frequently. But they're all very short, very sweet, and always give you some lovely moments of Majima just being either really, really kind, really, really helpful, or in some of them, like the statue one, where he just gets to be real goofy.
Mm-hmm.
And it is just... they are so good at like fleshing out tiny little things about characters that you would never see, because of the nature of the main Yakuza story being about obviously the Yakuza and very, very much crime thrillery topics.
Yeah, it's like the ones with Majima, there are a sprinkle of goofy ones, but that also fits the character, because the thing, because Kiryu is quite goofy. He actually gets a lot more tame as he gets older, and Majima goes the other way for a while. And would you agree on that?
Yes.
And here's the thing with Majima's ones, they're a little bit goofy. They're sprinkled around to the point where it would make sense if that influenced him. What's that? He saw a guy called Walking Erection? Yeah, sounds about right. But he's not going to be constantly going around being a film producer. Why would he do that on top of his cabaret club? He just gets pulled over and just dragged into things. Whereas Kiryu just like, oh word, I'm doing this. And to even summarize that up in 2 quotes is their reaction to the styles. Kiryu's word is, that's rad. And Majima's is, holy shit. Like, that's a reaction of, I'm going to have, that's like goofy and intense. The other one's like, uh-oh. But yeah, that's like, it's just a wonderful thing playing as Majima. And I'll ask you this, who do you actually prefer playing as?
It actually very much depends on the situation, actually. Or the fight itself, because they both got some really, really, really good fights. But I would say I like playing as Majima just a tiny weeny bit more. But that's only because Breaker is probably my favourite fighting style from the entire series.
I would argue the same for me. I prefer Majima. Because obviously before I played Zero, I played 3 and 4, so it's like I played a lot of Kiryu. So playing as someone else was such dedicated combat. Because in 4, there is a combat for the others, but it's not nowhere near as in depth as this.
Yeah, in 4 it's very much like they're better at one part of Kiryu's moveset. So like the first character you play as in 4, Akiyama, is better with kicks. And that's just kind of a extension of Kiryu's kick parts of his combos. Then you've got Saejima, who's very, very good with finishers and heavy hits, much like Kiryu's finishers. And then you've got Tanemura, who focuses on parrying and heat moves. And Kiryu can do both of them in different ways, like his Tiger Drop in some of the games, and he does have a parry in other ones. But they're still very much kind of offshoots of Kiryu, more than they are their own unique fighting style. And then you get to Majima, and he has 4 styles that really have not been in any other game. They make, like, one thing with Zero, with all the styles, they all make references to others. But Majima's is the only... Majima's styles may make references, but they are so different to every other fighting style that you've ever used that he's just completely new, and it's so much fun to explore all the options that he has, because he has so many more than Kiryu does in a lot of situations.
Yeah, Kiryu's are more like references towards other characters. Majima's are references to his future self.
Yeah.
Because obviously Breaker, he does jump around the field quite a lot in later fights in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. I wish we got a fight with him in the Dragon Engine. I mean, I know we had that one in Kiwami 2, but I like a full-on fight.
Yeah, because the one in because when you get to Kiwami 2, the focus on weapons is so much higher that you just kind of pull out a sword and stab him 3 times and he dies in Kiwami 2.
Yeah, and honestly, continuing the story, like you actually end up like going on a merry-go-round chase looking for Makoto. Who, when you heard Makoto, did you think it was a guy?
I really thought the Makoto was a female until they made reference to the fact it was a guy basically protecting hostesses out in the middle of Sotenbori, which is a plot point that doesn't come up again, but it is how Majima initially finds where he finds them.
Yeah, but at the same time, that I feel like that also does make sense, because if you actually look at the later bits of the game, I'll just spoil it right now. Like, you know how Oda mentions about Makoto being in the human trafficking?
Yeah.
It does make sense that the name is around her.
Yeah.
If they've taken that name and used it somewhere, it would make sense that it's in the red light stuff and all that. It would make sense that it's just round and people have heard the name. And it also would make sense that Lee, who is the guy you meet after this merry-go-round, is using that name to protect her because he knows she's vulnerable.
Yeah.
But yeah, you go through this merry-go-round, use phone calls. You think it's a guy. I thought it was a guy simply because of Persona 3.
Yeah.
Because I'd actually watched that a little while before the game, the movie, of course. I mean, and you get to there and you're like, you meet this harmless little girl. And you're like, oh, okay, I feel bad for her existence because she's blind and super like innocent, and you fight Lee because you think that's Makoto, but then you bust his butt. And with this fight is actually the first introduction of dynamic entries.
Yes.
Where they really get you hyped for the fight by playing a little bit of the fight before. It's very cinematic, but it's something that a lot of the series has done a lot more since they moved to the 5/0 engine, where they're able to be way more flamboyant. Because you'll just have the fight start with them just like about to punch. Because in other games you get a bit more crazy, like the name shows up and you have them hitting each other and it goes, okay, we mean business.
Yeah, because especially in 5, the dynamic intro for the final boss even has a QTE in it.
Yeah, and
which then leads into the fight, and you're like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. And while I'm remembering entries, There is one thing that we love about entries of characters in this series. Every time we learn about a new person, dun dun.
And then their name appears on screen, and it also shows their name, who they're associated with, and like other like any other information that they could fit in this little tiny box.
This game manages to be so anime yet so grounded at the same time. It hits the fine balance really well, and it's just actually kind of phenomenal how it can maintain that.
Yeah.
And speaking of cliffhangers, you run away because Lee's got into a brawl with some Yakuza who follows Majima's trail, who you will later find out to be part of Iwano's part, I think.
It might be Iwano's.
Or she besides, I do get a bit muddled on it.
No. They're part of Sarah's gang, aren't they?
It's a lot. There's a lot of people. It's hard to maintain who is who.
It's hard to remember sometimes, but basically a group of Yakuza basically take advantage of the fact that you've just been fighting with Lee, and basically goes, nope, and then try and take Makoto. So you end up going and saving Makoto and basically dragging her to safety because she's blind, and then the chapter ends with basically one of probably the best cliffhanger in the entire game, of Majima stood over this blind girl, basically deciding does he or does he not want to kill her.
Yeah, and it's just like, oh, and that's just the perfect thing about this thing. It's made you kind of forget about the Kiryu stuff. It's kind of made you completely focus on Majima, on everything to do with it. It's got you, and isn't honestly with Majima's bit's quite a lot shorter than Kiryu's, and it's got you invested so quickly. It's ridiculous. But at the same time, that's why the recap system works so well, because you need it. You genuinely need it to keep up with this.
Yeah, because like they also use it in a later game. They use it in Judgment. At the start of every chapter, the game gives you a recap of what occurred in the last chapter and slightly before it. Because the game throws so much at you, and the same happens in Zero, where it throws so much at you that it's very hard if you're walking around getting into random fights, doing side content, doing all this other stuff. It's hard to remember exactly what happened and when it occurred. Because if you are doing side content, it could be like 3 days before you get to the next story part, or before you get back to playing as Kiryu.
Like me.
Yeah.
For reference, I basically when we get to the later parts, I believe it was chapter 8 when you unlock the cabaret club. I just sat there and did it just before going on the story. It does really mess up the pacing, but that's not something I'm going to hold against the game at all. That's a me thing, because I'm sitting there grinding money, because obviously my most recent playthrough was actually on Legend, because I'm trying to plat the game because I want to do that eventually for the whole series. But yeah, you just sit there and go, oh yeah, and then you get back to Kiryu's bit and it's a little bit of whiplash, because you're just like, oh god, what's happening? And it's just a very low-key set of chapters for both Kiryu and Marjorie in their next Passover, which honestly is needed after how much exposition they've given you. The calm before what is going to be the crazy storm for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
And they're basically, this is where they dump all the mini games on you, because they obviously give you the real estate and Mr. Nugget as the real estate manager, which I have never got the chicken. I need to go and do it. I'm so sad at myself. I didn't know that. I think if I'd done it in 2017, I would have lost it. I would have lost my mind. I would have been like, this is it. This is life incarnate.
This is the best video game.
Chapter 5 has a lot of...
Yeah, Chapter 5 basically introduces your main piece of side content as Kiryu, and that's basically the whole chapter.
Yeah.
It's introducing you to the real estate stuff and shows you everything. And that's when the game shows you that you get too much money in Yakuza 0.
Yeah,
And
because
that's actually it's actually a funny reference because it's actually a reference to the 1980s bubble period in Japan,
is it?
where basically everyone was rich. Everyone had so
Oh,
much money, and money was abundant everywhere.
that explains why Kamurocho feels so run down in some of the games after.
Yeah, because in 1980s Japan, everyone had a lot of money. Well, not
Yeah.
everyone, but that's kind of the whole idea of it. Is that money was so much more abundant because their economy was booming. So everything had so that's why in Zero they decided to give you so much money, and it's the only game in the series where having like 1,000,000 yen is no money.
Yeah.
And then in every other game, having 1,000,000 yen, you're like, yo, I'm balling over it.
Yeah, because obviously, like, for reference in was it in Judgment? The game's for its completionist wants you to get 30 million yen.
Which
In
is
this
a lot.
game, in this game, for beating the real estate stuff, you get about 1 billion.
Yeah.
No, 100 billion or something daft. It's all absurd amounts.
But the game
And
does have a mechanic to counter this, though.
yeah, we haven't mentioned it yet, but it's this wonderful it's a walking super boss called Mr. Shakedown, whose whole mechanic is basically to watch you, make sure you actually use that money,
Yeah.
or be efficient, or just basically just give you a challenge, because there
Yeah.
isn't really many enemies outside of Colosseum stuff who really can give you a run for your money. Literally.
Yeah. But basically, you do get introduced to Shakedown in an earlier chapter as Kiryu, and you get introduced to the fact he takes your money. But it's not really a worry until you can start earning mega bucks from real estate, and that's when seeing Shakedown is a oh no, run away, run away, run away, run away, run away kind of moment.
Yeah, it's kind of funny thing is actually I've been playing Resident Evil 3 today, and I have the same reaction to some of that stuff as I do to Mr. Shakedown. I was like, no, 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 no.
Oh no 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 no.
Shout out to Liquid Squid for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just the game gives you a tutorial where you lose to him, and fortunately, the tutorial you don't actually lose any money. But like after that, whoops.
Whoops. He takes
Yeah.
you down and you lose all the money. But if you do beat him, you get all the money that he has.
And like that's not including just your money. It like accumulates over time a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I had actually a glitch in my first playthrough where he was just walking through a wall.
Oh, nice.
And okay, so what happened was the fight triggered, and he was still out of bounds, and he just fell through a floor, and it just killed him.
Oh,
And I was like, 500 million yen? Sure, I'll take that. Absolutely will. I shook you down, mister. But yeah, chapter 6, story-wise, that one's pretty hype, actually.
yeah, there's a lot that happens. So basically, in chapter 6, so after the wonderfulness that was chapter 5 and how kind of low key it was, in chapter 6, you basically find out that the Dojima family's out for Kiryu because they want him to take the fall for the assassination from earlier. So, because he's been allying himself with Tachibana Real Estate, he's now considered an enemy. So the entire chapter is you basically fight your way through Kamurocho to try and find some safety, and then you get to probably one of the best dynamic intros in any boss fight in the entire series, where Kuze rocks up with an iron pipe
On a motorbike.
and and hits you, and then basically taunts you, and then the dynamic intro part is you're talking to each other, and then you basically get the anime arm clash of Kiryu's two hands blocking the iron pipe, and afterwards you get a pretty decent boss fight. It's not as good as the
First one.
It's not as good as the first one.
I believe that's more to do with the actual arena being quite limited, I think.
Yeah, the arena you're in is basically a big sewer, so you actually get like some nice effects of like the water and all this other stuff.
Oh yeah, because that's like the motorbike slashes all over his face.
Yeah, it's such a cool arena for a boss
And
fight.
if I'm correct, I don't remember if this is this or chapter 9. They kind of blend together because they're so close to each other. I think Kiryu decides. Oh no, this no chapter 5. We actually did skip something where Kiryu decided to go to the go to. It's a bit like in Dragon Ball Z where they go, let's go somewhere safe, Kame House.
Oh
He goes
yeah,
to Serena. It's like the first place everyone would look, and which
yeah,
who does Iwano, which actually leads to him just randomly seeing, talking to Iwano, being like, please turn yourself in, do it, and he's like, no.
and Kiryu's like no,
But
and
yeah,
then and then like and then like you get to another incredible story section with him and Nishiki,
who
when
Nishiki has actually
where
been.
Nishiki tries to quote unquote save Kiryu by he basically drives him out to the middle of nowhere, and his idea of saving Kiryu is to kill him before the lieutenants get a hold of him,
Mercy kill.
because that will be a much better end for him versus what the lieutenants might do to him.
And this is really built up by like, a touching cutscene in Chapter 5 when Iwano shows up, where he just beats the living hell out of Nishiki a bit.
Yeah,
So you know, like, Nishiki is at threat for doing this.
yeah,
Because even if he does kill Kiryu, the lieutenants would potentially still be really angry at him
yeah,
and wouldn't believe him because he is, quote unquote, the anarchy.
yeah,
And Nishiki can't bring himself to do it.
yeah.
And
And
you do really
Kiryu,
believe it.
yeah, and Kiryu even says to him, he says if you can pull the trigger, do it, and take my head back and use it to climb the ranks of the Tojo clan.
Yeah.
And like, even though if you've played the other games in the series, you know Kiryu isn't in any danger here, it's still probably one of the best moments between those two, because it shows how vulnerable Nishiki really is without Kiryu being there to help him.
Yeah, and honestly, for someone who had basically no recollection of any idea what happens in 1 and 2, my brain's like, I knew Nishiki wasn't in 3, so he had to die. I was like, any of these characters that weren't in 3, I'm like, are they going to survive this game? So I had that, like, myself, there's the whole, like, are they going to live? Like, even yourself. Like, if you had, you didn't know if Nishiki would live this game. Like, you didn't know, you didn't really look at it, because you bought it digitally, you just went, okay, buy all 3 of Zero Kiwami quality. You didn't really go, oh, Nishiki's on the cover of this game. You didn't know who he was, you didn't blink at that. So you were obviously just sitting there like, oh, this is intense. And Nishiki breaks down crying, and Kiryu's just, he is straight-faced. This is where Kiryu's, like, character really, like, kind of shows it, which is what sticks for the rest of the series. And I think it's kind of a turning point. Because up until this, he's, like, kind of following other people, not really listening to himself. He has a tiny bit in in the chapter 1 where he kind of, like, sasses Kuze. But here he's just like, no, I'm believing in myself. He's stubborn. He is stubborn and willing to
He is
believe in
very
others.
stubborn, stuck in his ways, but at the same time, that's what makes Kiryu's character so like endearing and interesting.
Because
Is that he is so stuck in his ways and that he is very stubborn, and
because
that's what makes his determination and iron will and the fact he never gives up. He will never give up. It makes him like he is like kind of generic anime protag, but like
you still love him.
he's probably one of the better main characters from any any game that I've played.
Yeah, and honestly, the whole, like, stubbornness thing, it works because he is he is kind of the slap around the face people need at times.
Yeah.
Because the amount of times he does that to Majima, Haruka, well, not physically to Haruka, Nishiki in Zero, actually. Because obviously you see that contrast in Kiwami of when Nishiki's not there. Sorry, when Kiryu's not there for Nishiki.
Yeah.
You kind of see what kind of role model Kiryu is. You see that he is stubborn, and that he's going to go back to Kamurocho, which he does by taking the car, because he is going to see this through. He is not going to let Shintaro Kazuma's name be dragged through the dirt. He's doing this, and what do you know? Fantastic cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And
then
that's the thing. You sit there, and go. You had that intense, oh my god, Majima section, and then the game drops down on you. That whole cliffhanger there for chapter 6. You're just sitting there like, wow.
In 7, it goes, after its wonderful recap, it goes, just go to the go to the mahjong parlor and have a conversation with Lee,
who is very angry at you.
And you get a nice fight in the mahjong parlor, which is a staple of the Yakuza series, by the way.
Yep, you need to learn how to play those if you want to plan it.
Yeah.
God help you.
You need to learn how to play some mahjong. I can't play mahjong.
I would need a guide for it.
Yeah, every time.
I think I did actually a little bit in Judgment because there's a side story for it, where you just take in a case, or it might have been Kiwami 2, one of the two. It's been a while since I've played either of them, so like you just go and take the special piece and you win. But like you can continue this. You're like looking after Makoto and trying to figure out what is going on, because Majima hasn't actually killed her. Obviously, he doesn't want to do it because he doesn't want to kill, in his eyes, a harmless,
blind person.
Yeah, and he doesn't understand what the Yakuza want with her.
He doesn't actually know why she has to die either. No one has told him why she has to die. All he's been told is, you need to kill this person.
And what ends up doing is Lee obviously comes back, and they actually fake her death. Because
they try and fake her death.
Sagwa sees through it immediately.
Yeah, basically Majima says no, but Majima says no and throws away the stuff that he brought to fake her death. And then basically, I believe it's some Yakuza from another, I can't remember the name of the full clan, but it's a guy called Sira. It's his family. Basically find the clothes and reenact what they were going to do with it anyway.
It's the guy you actually showcased up at the start of chapter 3.
Yes.
You actually come back, because then you go back to Cabaret and having a fight with him, because he calls the police halfway through it. And
oh no, that's Nishitani. That's a different guy.
Sorry, I got mixed up. But yeah, Nishitani is the one who did the framing of the fake death. But Sarah is another player in this. You see, the stakes start to really rise, and it's a slow escalation, but it's really good.
So during these, and also during this set of chapters for Majima, is when you get introduced to his side content, his main piece of side content, which is the Cabaret Club.
Oh boy.
Oh boy, Cabaret Club.
I would argue I much prefer the real estate one, because this one takes a lot longer. But
and also the Cabaret Club is probably one of the most, is actually, for it being a timed minigame, it's extremely involved. You have to pay attention to every little thing.
Oh yeah, like the like the animations that girls make. I've actually memorized them. It's like
you have to remember them, because you get bonus points and make more money for basically serving customers correctly.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's true to Yakuza, they even have a heat mode for that.
Yeah.
Which is just them increasing the amount of money, but it's still like, okay, that's cool. So yeah, you get that nice time dump, and for reference, did you know that, when Zero, the person who's helping you run it, no, sorry, one of the girls who's the main girl there, yeah?
Yeah.
She's one of
the owners of the one in Kiwami too.
I was about to mention that. I was like, when I found that out, that's a fantastic reference.
Yeah.
And the game just dumps that on you, and then you go back to the cabaret and fight Nishitani, because you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
And then this triggers an unbelievable, like, for the moment, a set of expense, because Majima's bit's been very low key. there's not been much drama. The Nishitani stuff is the most drama there's been.
Then right after Nishitani, you get flung into a bit where you fight Lee again, because is that the bit where you fight Lee again? Yeah, because you fight Lee and then you fight the Watchers of the people. You basically fight the people who have been watching you in Sotenbori, making sure you don't act out. And then after that, you play a bit where you have to drag Makoto to a safe location, aka they're gonna try and drive her out of the city. So you get to another stealth section. Cause in that section which you mentioned before, where we have to stop the Yakuza from taking her, you play a stealth section after that where you protect her whenever Yakuza come near you. This is another one of those, which ends in probably with another great cliffhanger, because Majima just gets all the good cliffhangers.
He really does.
Where you walk up to this car with Lee is in it, waiting for you two to get there, and when he gets in the car and starts the ignition, the car explodes. That's basically where the chapter ends. You see this guy in a white suit appear, and the chapter just kind of ends.
We haven't actually mentioned yet, speaking of white suits, Kiryu gets a white suit in chapter 5, which which Nishiki also hates, which also adds to the whole bros kind of thing.
Yeah,
but yeah,
bros. Kiryu really likes it, and Nishiki's like, bro, you look really stupid in that.
I mean, he does, to be fair.
Oh yeah, he does.
I actually do think he looks better in the black grey suit. It kind of suits him more.
Yeah.
But then it's also like, it works after all, because when you see him in the grey suit at the end, they're getting like, whoa, 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 whoa. No, go back to the white one. But yeah.
Yeah, go back to the white one, please.
Yeah, you see like, that cliffhanger, you kind of, you know something's going to go wrong, but you don't know what's going to go wrong. Like, I didn't expect the first time I played it to the car to blow up. I thought that they were going to get to the car and then Saga was just going to walk around and be like, because Saga at this point is also clocked in that
he's aware that Makoto's still alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you just get that.
Yeah, and you basically think that it's his Yakuza that are after her the whole time, and then when it turns out that it's someone else's, you're just like, oh, and then like the chapter ends with Majima getting knocked out by this guy in the white suit who is Sarah, and then you basically get cut back to Kiryu.
God, that is such a good cliffhanger, because like, you go through all this effort and you're like, uh-oh, I'm in danger.
Yeah.
And you get back to Kiryu's bit, and yet again, Kiryu decides to hide at Serena. So it shows he's stubborn. He kind of just tries to think everything's going to be okay. Because he's gone back. I don't remember why he goes back.
He goes back to see the whole, to basically finish what he started. But then, but then this is the chapter where where you go to a couple of places, where you go to the Kazuma family office, then Kiryu decides to not hide there because he doesn't want to endanger Kashiwagi and everyone in there. So then he goes and sits on the bench behind Serena, and then Reina, who is the owner of Serena at that time, tells him to come up and hide in there, which obviously it is very much like the Kamehameha from Dragon Ball Z, where that is literally the first or second place someone would look for Kiryu.
Yeah, especially since, Nishiki goes there, and they must know Nishiki goes there.
Yeah.
So he goes outside, and it's just a whole bunch of Yakuza from Kuze's lot.
And honestly, you get another good fight with Kuze.
And
where
this is,
you get so many weapons around you because you're in the middle of a street.
And you're right by I think it's in, I can't remember the name of the stores. It's bothering me. It's not M Store. Is it M Store?
Yes, you talk about the convenience stores.
Yeah, it's M Store.
Yeah, they're called M
or Popo, or where one of the two.
M Store.
I think that was an M Store. But my favourite heat move, I didn't know this one was there until I did it. I just kicked Kuze over, picked up a kettle, and just sprinkled it all over his face, and it was just like, wow. But yeah,
Yeah.
that one's just like that one's fantastic for Beast. It's another use of just like subtly because it spawns you right by the weapons.
Yeah.
It kind of
You
again,
also have you also have a like the QTEs that you have with Kuze are all so much fun.
mm-hmm.
I think I'm not sure if I think it's in the final fight you have with Kuze where that's my favorite one. But there's some good stuff in this fight.
Yeah,
Then
and
the
we also
cutscene afterwards is absolutely hilarious, where Tachibana just kind of rams through tons of people in his car. Because we kind of did forget to mention, but Tachibana has a fake arm,
he does.
and that kind of inhibits his ability to do normal things, i.e., he shouldn't be driving. And then he just kind of like rams through tons of people and drives like an absolute maniac just because he's like, no, I need to help Kiryu.
Yeah, he floors Kuze. It's hilarious.
He does.
Kuze is literally a punching bag.
Yeah, he completely does him in.
And also, just while referencing the Kuze fight you just had, that's actually again that's your third fight with him, and
Yeah.
you know that the way this game keeps its challenge up as well is by having bosses kind of being a bit like you, where they don't have heat moves per se,
He
but
has different styles and he uses different weapons in every fight.
they have heat energy. Because
Yeah.
the way Kiryu normally has it in most games, he has blue and then red. As in, blue is his standard heat and red's like the, oh boy, you're gonna die. And they do the same thing here, but for bosses. And it's kind of a like, think of it like Dragon Ball Z, raise your power level. Because you just got to deal with it. You got to man up, know how to dodge them. Because if you get hit in that, you're getting done. Getting completely destroyed.
Yeah, like you getting better with heat. All your opponents have, especially bosses, will have what's known as heat phases, and in their heat phases, their defense goes up or their attack goes up. They get super armor. They're less likely to fall to get grabbed by you, and loads of different little minor things. And in most boss fights, bosses will either start in heat mode, or after their mid-fight QTE, which is kind of like the loading trigger for a second phase of a fight. They will then enter their heat phase and get all their other moves and their super armor. And they usually have different openings, different like weaknesses, and all this other stuff, which means that you have to adapt to what is thrown at you halfway through a fight, which is one of the nicer things in how this game really sells you on its combat, especially some of the later bosses where they get kind of a bit crazy. But they've still got very like realistic like weaknesses, because obviously they are just regular dudes.
Yeah, and it's just a case of these bosses never feel unfair. Like if you look at Kingdom Hearts, just for comparison, those bosses have super armor and they just don't stagger. In this case, they have super armor. You can still get through openings, plenty of openings.
You can still stagger them, especially.
There's so many opportunities.
It's only particular moves where they throw out which has super armor.
And it's very rare that the game doesn't give you any weapons to use. Because the game obviously doesn't give you as many towards the end of the game, because you especially you've invested a bit and learnt. But here it's just a case of go ham, and then Tachibana, as you say, pops up. They roll off of Oda and just go. And this is where the plot comes together. Because you spent the whole time thinking this game was going to have a crossover. That there were two plots going into one, didn't you? Or did you think they were
when I first played it, I thought they were two separate plots. And then, because I haven't played any other Yakuza games, and now when they converge in this chapter and you find out everything that's gone on, you're like, oh my god.
Yeah, because I put the whole time playing this game, I expected it. For some reason, I thought they were going to do, like, some A Way Out thing, where the final boss would have been you fighting the other.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have made sense. But you would have done if they make a 0.5. But, yeah, you just start to get it all coming together, because you have a destination. You're going to Sotenbori. I'm like, why are you going to Sotenbori? Oh, because we need to get my, I've located the person who's the owner of the empty lot, And at that exact moment, I'm like, it's Makoto.
Yeah.
The moment he says, empty lot owner Makoto, and I'm like, sorry, empty lot owner Mori, I'm like, that explains what everyone's after. Bam. And then it's revealed, and cliffhanger, you're like, hmm.
Hmm. And yeah, so then you head into chapter 10. Chapter 10's another pretty cool chapter where after chapter 9, the whole reason why Tachibana kind of yeets Kuze and then drives off with Kiryu is because he wants to take Kiryu to the Tojo clan to basically give Kiryu the main protection of the Tojo clan, so the Dojima family can't hunt him anymore. By basically saying to them, if I find you the owner of the empty lot, you can have the empty lot. And you can also have all this money that I'm going to give you. Which they agree to, but then you have to fight your way out of the Tojo clan anyway. Which is another cool set piece in this game. Which they also do in Kiwami as well, or Yakuza 1. So obviously the one in 0 is kind of a reference to the one that they have in the first game, which is pretty cool, and you get some nice little kind of in-fight cutscenes as well, especially with some of the QTEs with the guy with the sword.
Yeah, because that chapter 10 is just a whole bunch of just fighting through the Tojo clan, which is something that has not been done for ages, so it's a nice breath of fresh air if you've been playing the games on release order. But you also just have like co-op moves with
Oda.
that's when they just grab a person, you beat on them. It's refreshing.
Yeah, every single partner that you ever have in any Yakuza game, you actually have heat moves alongside them in most of them. Which if you're near them and you do a heat move, you will at the same time do something with them, which is always cool to see what kind of heat moves you can get with each of the character combinations that the game might throw at you.
Oh yeah, and if you're having different weapons, they have different
yeah, they have different moves as well. It's all cool.
Yeah, and that's just a wonderful well, I would say it's probably one of the more forgettable ones, but it's still pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And that's just chapter 10 basically.
Yeah.
Because then you go back to Majima, because that was that bit with finding out Makoto is the thing, is the cliffhanger, because you're like, oh, but Majima's trying to get out of there.
Yeah.
So are they going to be in opposite places? You start thinking that. And Majima's bit is a lot of a wild goose chase, really.
Majima's bit afterwards is very much him just trying to work out where Makoto is. So you get a chance to go into Colosseum for the first time, which is underneath the waterbed in Sotenbori. And then you get to, and then after proving your worth to the corrupt policeman there, which is a fairly common trope in Yakuza games. The corrupt policemen are always a thing in these games. You end up going to a prison where you get to have another fight with Nishitani, which is also another really cool fight, because all the QTEs you have with Nishitani are very cinematic and look very painful when you get them right.
They do. And yeah, I actually did forget about the whole Nishitani bit there. It's just a game full of so much wild stuff.
Then right after the Nishitani bit,
it's so wild. It's you actually start bonding with him.
Yeah.
You start
then the cutscene after the Nishitani fight, where basically he sacrifices himself to basically tell Majima where to go, which is what happens in chapter 12, where you go to the place where Makoto is being kept and basically break through the entire building, which is another really cool set piece where you get to break dance on everyone with Majima if you so choose. There are other fighting styles available, but and then you get a really cool boss fight at the end, and then another cutscene where you want to punch Sagawa just right in the face because
he shoots Sarah.
He shoots Sarah instantly.
Yeah, after Sarah's pulled the your princess is in another castle.
Yeah, basically, yeah, you get all the way through Bowser's castle, and Sarah stood at the end like, "Nah, sorry, your princess is in another
and
castle, my friend."
and then the whole thing starts to come together
Yeah,
because he gives you the card of none other than Tachibana Real Estate's Kazuma Kiryu,
yep,
and you're just like, oh, oh no, are they gonna meet? Because obviously in Kiwami or any other game, they never showed how they met. They just know of
yeah,
each other, and then you get that's a cliffhanger because the whole twist is Kiryu was already there. Kiryu had already been.
yeah,
So for the next one, they actually reverse it, which I think is a nice change of pace to be like, 'cause it throws you off a little bit. To where you have your timed wait, which I know from speedrunning, where you have to wait for Oda to be ready,
yes, yeah,
where you basically just I ended up spending it doing like the actual the equivalent of Club Sega. I don't remember the name of it there, but like, it's Club Sega. I was just sitting
I
in
think
the
it's Club Sega then something else.
yeah,
But yeah, basically, the next chapter with Kiryu is actually it happens before chapter 12 in Majima's story, where basically Kiryu is in Sotenbori, ready to go basically collect Makoto from Sarah,
hmm,
and you basically walk in there, you come out with her, and then you get just the game throws you into a on-rail shooter section, which the game basically fully reminds you that Kazuma Kiryu never kills anyone, because
yeah. They in this series, cutscenes and gameplay are so detached, really. So if you actually wanted to just gauge the story and just watch the cutscenes, that's canon. The gameplay, no,
yeah, the gameplay,
because
anything can happen.
basically Kiryu just starts gunning cars down and gunning a helicopter down. It's like no one died. Nah, no one died.
Yeah, no one dies. No one dies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that
And
ends up with gone.
then after that section, a piece of fun trivia that actually on Zero you can only on the PC version you can only use a control stick, but then in the shooting section they did in Kiwami, I think it must have been in one as well. You can actually use the mouse on the PC version to aim it, so it's like 5 times easier than the one in Zero.
Yeah, and also that that section is actually really tough on Legend.
It is pretty tough because you get like 2 shot.
You absolutely do. So I remember I nearly actually rage quit there on my like Legend playthrough
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it's
I remember
brutal.
that.
But
And
then,
then and
go
then
on.
after that great piece of content, you get put basically you stop off by a multi-story car park to basically try and hide for a bit, and you then basically find out that Oda was hired by Shibasawa to basically kill Kiryu and then take Makoto to him. Otherwise, he would basically kill Tachibana.
Yeah, and he couldn't bring himself. He saw Tachibana as a like a role model,
Yeah,
and he was like,
and
oh, oh,
he
if he,
was gonna do it actually if
because
Kiryu hadn't have like. Well, no, it wasn't even Kiryu. Basically, Sarah had given Makoto a cane, a blind cane with a knife in the top. So when Oda grabs her, she just pulls his knife out and stabs him with it. And yeah, then you basically have a segment where you fight through a bunch of guys while protecting Makoto. And unlike Majima's bit, Kiryu has some sense to stand her in places where she can't get hit. So
yeah, it's because that wants to focus more on the combat because it's a lot smaller areas as well.
yeah, and you get to fight a guy with a buzzsaw who likes to super armor through everything, but at least you're surrounded by weapons to smack him back with.
Yeah, and then that ends obviously with like just
with
the whole revelations. You're just like sinking in it.
yeah, and then the chapter afterwards, the fun doesn't stop there. You get back to Kamurocho,
Oh boy.
and you take as a favor from the homeless guys that you helped earlier, because in an earlier chapter when Kiryu was trying to hide in Kamurocho, he stays with the homeless community in what is known as Purgatory, which is the West Park, and as a favor, because he helped them with some homeless hunters earlier, they basically take Makoto for him and basically let her stay there while he goes out and tries to find her brother. And oh boy, you find her brother in the hospital that he was in earlier, because you find out that he has diabetes and he has to basically go under dialysis every 48 hours.
Which is why his energy levels were kind of all over the place when he drove the car.
Yeah, that's why his energy levels are all over the place, and that's why he's really struggling to drive the car. But yeah, you find out that he has diabetes, and then you find out that basically Kuze has kidnapped him and taken him for questioning. So our boy Nishiki comes around and's like, "Hey, we should go find him."
Which they rip their shirts off and just beat some people up on the street and then put them back on.
Yeah, and then they put the shirts back on again.
Like civilized people.
Like civilized people.
But no, and then the way they deal with Tachibana is actually so sad. But the way it's so smart.
Yeah.
Because Tachibana is getting beaten by brain dead Yakuza, and he's like insulting them to make him kill him, basically.
Yeah.
Because he knows that if he dies, they ain't gonna get anything.
Yeah.
They're not gonna find out where Kodo is.
Yeah.
Why would they're not gonna do anything? And Kiryu gets there, and he's livid. Because you can see the paw, the whole texture thing with with how they have loads of paws on his head. Like, you notice it because he gets so angry, and him and Nichiki just team up on Kuze, I think, and it's just
they team up on Kuze, and that's another great dynamic intro to a fight. Because Kiryu just goes Kuze, runs in, smacks him in the face, and then like the name just appears on screen.
Oh, is it the one with like the fist? You just see...
Yeah, it's the fist where it goes, Rah! Then smacks.
Yeah, that was a great one. And then it's like, Tachibana's covered in blood and everything. You carry him outside, he's just gone, and I don't remember who.
You take him to the empty lot, which is where you're meeting. You basically, you take him to the empty lot, then Nishiki goes and gets Makoto and brings her to the empty lot, so she can have her last moments with.
Breaks down.
Yeah.
And
that's when she regains part of her sight, because Makoto hadn't actually. She wasn't blind from birth. She became blind due to trauma from when she was part of the human trafficking stuff.
Mm-hmm.
From the clan of mafia, the Chinese mafia that Oda and Tachibana were a part of years ago.
Yeah.
And so that's where Tachibana meets his end.
And that's where the chapter meets its end. So, seriously, the game's cliffhangers are, oh boy, and that one's hit you like a truck at that point, and the truck is about to come back for more, because you're about to play as Majima for the final switch before the finale, and in this one, Majima is now on his way to Kamurocho with Sagawa, who's on the understanding that Makoto's in there, and he's very much being like, come on, because the whole thing for him is he has an agreement with Shimano, because Shimano is trying to, this is where it gets a little bit fiddly, Shimano is trying to get the Omi Alliance to take down some of the Tojo influence so that Shimano can take the Tojo clan top. Basically, so he can get Kuze, Wano, Dojima, and Shibusawa out of commission. Boom. but also Shibusawa has become more aware at this point because he's not been much involved, and Dojima's let him off the reins. So he's been sending people to basically find Makoto. Well, obviously they're on a merry-go-round chase right now. So you go to Shimano, who brings the revelation that this whole thing with him going to Sotenbori, the whole Makoto thing, it was a test. It was a test to see if Majima was the man that Shimano thought he was, even if it is a little bit of a stretch. It's the one stretch I have in the game because Shimano's not a smart guy. Because he believes that Majima wouldn't kill Makoto because he was obviously wanting to screw over the Omi guys as well, because that's what Yakuza are like. They're out for bettering themselves, not their others. And you just get this whole thing where basically Shimano is just revealing it to Majima, and you're just like, wow. Because Shimano he basically believed that Majima wasn't going to kill her, and that he would help basically drag everything into helping them get the empty lot, because him getting a bond with her meant that he could convince her to basically give it up, wasn't it?
Yes.
And that
basically
that
by
actually
making
makes
friends
sense.
with her, it was to try and basically get her to willingly hand over the deed without anything going wrong.
Because he sent Majima there to basically rescue her, pretty much.
Yeah.
Which is, again, it's a stretch, but at the same time, that's crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. So Majima's entire chapter 15 is him looking for Makoto. So he ends up getting into a fight with Nishiki and Serena, because obviously that's where he hears the information is going to be, because that's where everyone is.
We also have forgotten one big thing from chapter 14. Lao Gui.
Oh, we did forget about Lao Gui.
Lao Gui just shows up as a hitman. He is the one who killed the person in the empty lot. And he is just there to clean up Kiryu and Tachibana, which is why Tachibana was in Little China. Little China a little later, because he got shot.
Yeah, we did forget about Lao Gui. Lao Gui's the one who goes and takes Tachibana to Kusei, basically.
Yeah, that's how he gets there. And
yeah, that's how he gets there.
And he's around. But he's not involved in Majima's bit until later, because he's obviously he's a hired one by Dojima.
Yes, he's basically Dojima's personal kind of assassin that he just keeps forever.
Yes, we go back to the bar fight. That's a pretty cool one, because even though Nishiki has nothing to do with Majima, you care about Nishiki.
Yeah.
And
you're like, oh no, I have to punch him now.
Yeah, and it's actually the one of the mythical trophies here is actually for getting hit in the face by Reina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a couple of really, really cool QTs. There's one where she actually throws the healing medication at Nishiki that you can jump and nick and then take yourself, and it does heal you. And if you let Nishiki have it, it heals him basically the full.
Yeah, it's a nice little fight.
Yeah.
And that's the chapter 15 boss fight, really.
Yes, chapter 16 is all about Majima finding out where Makoto went.
Oh, yeah, because he goes up to the empty lot.
And going and getting her.
Because he finally reaches the empty lot and sees her up on the roof.
Basically, she tells him to go, someone tells him to go check the empty lot. I can't remember if it's her leaving him a message or something, because they meet up before then. I can't remember the context. But he goes and buys her takoyaki. I think this might be, and then he goes to the, then she disappears. Then he goes looking for her, and then he ends up at this big building that's owned by Dojima, where he basically beats through Dojima's entire guard force solo, and then goes up to the top where she is basically selling her land to Dojima.
But the best bit of that is, so she goes there kind of on vengeance, because she's getting her eyesight back, because the trauma's gone, and basically she's going out of pure revenge, and she goes there and says to Dojima, I'll give you the land, But you know what you're gonna give me? The heads of those who killed my brother.
Yeah.
And basically, they're like, basically, it's like walking into the lion's den.
Yeah. And
Because
she gets
bodied.
the wrong end of the lion's den.
Because Lao Gui Shoyusa.
Shoitsa.
Shush.
Yeah, so
Majima is
and
absolutely losing it at this point because
and yeah,
he's been
this is
slowly getting
and
more and more
and
like.
this is the event that starts his kind of downfall into who he becomes in the later games,
Mm-hmm.
where he goes, well, sod it, I'm gonna go crazy now, and everyone's gonna die,
Well.
and he just kind of starts going crazy on people.
Because should we break down chapter 17 as one character at a time? I think that's a lot easier than going back and forth.
No, I think we should go back and forth actually because no, we can go back and forth. I've got a way of doing that.
Okay. So I usually lead on that one because I don't particularly remember which one goes first.
Yeah, so basically right at the start of chapter 17. So chapter 17 is the only chapter where you play as both Kiryu and Majima.
Which is a nice change of pace after the whole 2-2.
Yeah, so the start of so the end of the chapter 16 is Majima basically beats up a bunch of people on a roof, goes no, and then heads to the Dojima family HQ to start going crazy on everyone. Kiryu ends up going to the docks because he hears that's where he'll get his information from. So him and Nishiki head to the docks and basically find that there's a bunch of Yakuza from Dojima's family attacking the boat. And then Kashiwagi shows up with members of the Kazuma family to basically back up Kiryu and Nishiki. Basically, there's a huge big set piece where like you fight basically through an entire boat of Yakuza, all looking for Makoto because basically they took her from the hotel where she was at because the hospital, that's the right word. Yeah, the hotel where she got shot. No, the hospital where she was at after she got shot. Basically Sarah took her and hid her on the boat.
Because the Yakuza trying to kill her.
Because the Yakuza were still after her because of I don't think they finished signing off all the deeds to the land.
No. It was the case of basically that they kind of bent back on it. If the owner of the lot is dead, it's free land.
Yeah.
So that's what they would have played, or that was what they would have played from the start, to be honest.
Yes.
And they catch wind of that, and chaos is ensuing.
They put her on a boat to try and hide her because if they need to just leave the land, they can. But it doesn't go all to plan because the Tojo clan, I believe the nurse was already in cahoots with Shibusawa because Shibusawa is played off as like this huge mastermind who has contingencies for contingencies.
Mm-hmm.
And basically Kiryu and Nishiki have to fight through the entire boat to basically get to Makoto and save her.
And it's honestly a really nice final gauntlet for Kiryu because
because you get to use all of your styles because all of your styles are useful in that entire thing. Even Rush
is really good for the guns.
Yeah, Rush is very good for the gun guys because the gun guys have higher chances to stun, but also the gun guys tend to have like 3 hits on them, so Rush can easily be rid of them. You then get a lovely nice cutscene where after you finish going through the entire boat, it then cuts to what Majima's doing. And Majima turns up at the Dojima family.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, at the start of chapter 17, you see him losing it at the hospital.
Yes.
It's just like you see him like
he's at the hospital.
The rails are going.
Yeah, he's at the hospital crying, and then he's like, I know what I'm gonna do.
He's gonna take revenge for those who hurt her.
He is gonna take revenge
because she can't do it.
And he goes to the Dojima clan HQ. The Dojima family HQ and just goes crazy on everyone. basically beats his way through the entirety of the Dojima family thugs, and then he comes face to face with one of the lieutenants, who we haven't really had much of outside of, I think it's chapter 6 with Kiryu, chapter 5 or chapter 6, where Kiryu meets him in a nightclub, and that's Awano. And Awano just happens to be there, and basically you fight Awano in actually quite a neat little boss fight, actually. And then after you've dealt with Awano, because he's not really the main culprit in all of this, he was just present, you then get to fight with our friend Lao Gui, who has multiple crazy attacks, multiple styles, and has a really fun fight concept of being like a super assassin. He's very much a cliche kind of assassin type character,
and he honestly feels like a final boss.
He does. He feels like a final boss, and it's cool because that is Majima's final boss.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a couple of phases. You go through a rune transition. He has really cool weapons. He has like the Wolverine. He has like a set of Wolverine knives that he throws at you.
Doesn't he break one of the pillars and stuff?
He can do if you let him do it.
It's crazy.
Then after that, you find out that Sarah survived the shooting from earlier, and he basically shows up and tells Majima that he can calm down now. Makoto's fine. And that Kiryu is handling it.
Yeah, and he basically advises, like, look, don't kill for revenge, it's not what she would want. Which,
yeah.
And I've seen arguments saying that, like, but Makoto was one. It was like, yeah, because Makoto was acting in rage as well.
Yes.
And he didn't want...
Makoto was acting out of character, we'll call it.
Yeah, and so was Majima. And both of them... He was like, I'll do it, because he doesn't want to make Majima go off the rails. Or, Makoto as well. And so he does it, and doesn't he end up getting the empty lot because of it?
Yes, he does. Basically, Sarah shows up with a gun and says to because Majima beat down Lao Gui, in the context of the story, regardless of how easily you dealt with him,
mm-hmm.
It acts like Majima easily dealt with Lao Gui.
Yeah.
And basically, Sarah demands that Lao Gui works for him, and that he gets the deeds to the empty lot, which he does.
Because Sarah's also been playing the game.
Yeah. Because he's been the hidden player in the background playing the game, and he already had the deeds to the lot because he had Makoto before.
Yeah, and he got her to agree.
Yeah.
So that solves that end, and then you're just left with Kiryu resolving his bit.
It cuts to Kiryu's final boss, which is with the final Lieutenant Shibusawa.
This is the first and only time you fight him. Same with Iwano.
Same with Iwano. Kuze is very much a recurring villain, and Kuze is like I'm trying to think of another character from another game. He's very much like I'm trying to think of another character from another RPG that you fight a number of times.
He's a good recurring villain because he starts gaining respect for you.
Yeah, basically he starts off hating your guts, and then by the end of the game, he like actually really likes you because you are becoming more and more like the person he wants you to be.
Yeah, he says you're finally acting like a proper Yakuza now.
Yeah. Because
Kiryu is, by the end of the game, actually acting like he does in one. Because in an early game, he is very emotional and in the moment and listening to others a lot. But in the end, he is just like, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And he's just like, if you piss me off, I am going to take action. But it's calculated. Yeah. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. And then in this fight with Shibusawa, which has a banger song, by the way. We haven't mentioned the music yet, but the game has got so many good tracks, and the final boss music with Shibusawa is so strong.
Yeah,
And you get this really, really cool fight where you go between the head of the boat to the middle of the boat with a bunch of tables and chairs, where you start throwing tables and chairs at each other back to the nose of the boat by basically throwing each other up the stairs. And Shibusawa actually is very much, he has Kiryu's dragon style and he has Kiryu's beast style in the parts where we're at the top deck of the boat. He uses mostly kind of a dragonish style. In the bottom, he uses a beast style where he picks up tables and starts flinging around tables and stuff. And yeah, Kiryu basically in every single QTE you have with that guy, he just goes absolutely crazy on him because Kiryu has basically gone, well, you're the one that caused all this suffering. I am going, and he basically nearly says, I'm going to kill you.
And then he's about to actually go and try it.
Yeah, so like after one of the most incredible, where like the final QTE section for the game is you're basically beating him like over the edge of the boat. You then throw him behind you, and like have one final punch to the jaw, and the music cuts out in such a perfect way. Like, it's so good. And then afterwards, the cutscene, it shows what would happen if Kiryu actually let himself be the worst of him, which is someone who would be willing to kill someone. And it's actually, and it's the words of Nishiki that gets him to stop, because Nishiki says, "This isn't who you are. This isn't who you need to be."
Which is such a good like role reversal.
Which is such a good role reversal, especially if you know what happens in Kiwami with Nishiki, because
it hurts. It hurts.
It hurts so much more.
It makes it worse because I honestly didn't know Nishiki died in one. I thought Nishiki was, at that point I was like, oh, okay, Nishiki's still alive. Like I reckon, because there's loads of characters alive between that point on one. I'm like, okay, loads more dying in one, loads more dying two.
Yeah, basically, like, until 4, you can basically go, well, this character's more than likely dead. Well, this character's more than likely dead. And they kind of started to run out of characters, which is why they've just been... That's why there's always so many new characters that they have to introduce.
Yeah. And
right.
then that gets the end of the game because it wraps it up. Kiryu goes back to the Dojima family.
Yes.
With the famous grey suit. And
the famous grey suit.
And then Majima's resolution. Oh, that's lovely. Because you see he has a final talk with Sagwa. He leaves and Sagwa's like, I'm dead.
Yeah.
And
Sagwa gets assassinated by someone. And then,
Majima just says to him, I'm sick of being caged.
Yeah, and he finds a person who, he basically finds Makoto out in Kamurocho with basically the new people that she's been hanging out with. This like doctor, who she likes and he likes her. And Majima basically gives him the dad talk of, you better look after this woman, because she is something very, very special to him. Because she's the reason why he becomes like he does and why he decides to let go and just have fun with his life.
Well, here's the thing, he knows that basically, I think he just doesn't want her to know what he's really like.
Yes,
he loves her, but he doesn't. He knows that he will, because of the life he's lived.
Yeah. Something small that we never mentioned is that he never told her his name, either. So she has no idea.
She only knows his voice.
She only knows the voice, because she doesn't even know he has an eye patch. She doesn't know what he wears.
Because he's quiet the whole cutscene, then he drags the doctor over.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. If he had been in his cabaret outfit, then she might have had a chance of figuring it out. But he's in his like modern gear, which at that point is short hair, the yellow.
Short hair, the shirtless with the jacket on top.
Yeah, because at this point he said to Saga, "I'm letting loose." Which, here's the thing, basically, it's a whole revelation that Majima isn't actually crazy. He is just so fucked off with attachments and pain that he's just like, oh, fuck it, I'm living life.
Yeah.
I am just gonna go wild, take the mick, do whatever I want, which explains so much of his behaviour in 1, because in 1 he's just obsessed with having fun, and his idea of fun is to take down Kiryu. But like in this case, he's just like, he knows that with the whole Yakuza thing, with everything that Makoto's gone through, he can't bear to do it. He can't bear to go through with it. Well, not go through it. He knows she deserves better.
Yes.
And it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah, and I think the most heartbreaking moment of it is there's a bit earlier on when he has her in hiding, when he notices that she's wearing a watch, and he asks her about the watch, and she's like, "Oh, it's broken. It hasn't worked for years." And he actually took that watch from her, and he goes and gets it fixed. And basically, he knows at some point she'll go back to the empty lot to basically pay respects to her brother. So he buries the fixed watch there,
and it plays the tune.
And it plays the tune that she recognizes, and it's just such a great way of symbolizing that him giving her the watch is him basically saying, "I'm going to live my life to the fullest. You go live yours to the fullest."
Mm.
And then, obviously, with the added content from Kiwami 2, with the Majima stuff, it's such a fulfilling story between him and this random blind woman that they had this kind of fleeting meeting with over, like, the span of, like... You have to remember, the span of this game is only a couple of days. Like, a few days, maybe. Like, everything just happens so fast.
Yeah, it's genuinely kind of crazy. And then...
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it just... You have a post-credit scene where you're just recovering, and it just finally shows Kiryu and Majima face to face.
Yeah.
It's not it's not implied. I don't know if it's implied whether it's their first meeting.
Yeah. But they meet.
You see, as in Majima's words, the switch flick. He flicks the switch.
Where he starts, he goes, "Yo,
Chan,
Kiryu-chan," and that's when you know that it's. I feel like it's kind of Kiryu that also helps him throughout his life as well become who he wants to be. Because Kiryu is kind of another person who they're kind of very much like each other when you really put them into perspective, because they're both kind of staged as invincible Yakuza.
But they're not.
They're really, really not. They're both very, very, very vulnerable, like, people in general.
Yeah, and I feel like Kiryu is just someone who he just bounces off Kiryu well, which is why... Because you notice that a lot of his act starts to fade. Actually, his act doesn't fade until he leaves the Tojo clan. Really.
Yeah.
Because he starts just... Because he keeps the switch flip because it's a lot... I don't say an act. But I think he starts to get tired of it after 1. He just hadn't... by the end of 1, he's had enough. And he starts reverting back to his zero self. Slowly. Like, 2, he's having fun, but he's also a bit like, eh.
3, he's also being very much serious. 3, he's actually really, really tame in 3, 4, and 5.
Because he's back to zero self.
Because he's back to his zero self, because of story context within those games, because he agrees to help Kiryu with something in 3, and then he just kind of continues doing it throughout.
Yeah, like 4, the whole thing we mentioned at the start with Saijima, that gets resolved, so his character arc's more or less wrapped up.
Yeah.
At that point, he's just like, I don't have that anymore, I don't have to, atone for my brother's sins. He can just do what he wants. And enough time's passed since Makoto to where he just mellowed. And it's just a wonderful game.
Yeah.
Like... And that's just the story, really.
Yeah, the one thing I do like about the story is actually, during... I can't remember if it's during the credits or, like, before or after them, But basically, the game gives you basically little images with stories as to what happens to the character after the events of Zero.
That's during the credits, yeah.
Yeah, and basically that's just a really nice way of showing that the events of the game do shape who they become, and it kind of bridges the gap between Zero and One, because One is about 5 to 6 years after the events of Zero.
Yeah, and honestly, Zero gives a lot more context to One.
Yeah.
That helps it. But in general, like, it's honestly a fantastic game. I think one of the most underrated things in the Yakuza franchise is the voice acting and the music. Cause,
Yes.
God, the voice acting. There's a few characters here and there that do suck, and I know it's hard to gauge Japanese because we're not Japanese, but like you can tell that there's some really, really convincing yelling and just emotional talk.
Yeah, and then with the entire OST, every single style has in regular combat has like their own music, and all the set piece music is beautiful. All the karaoke songs are so good. Like all the themes that you have are all like really, really good to listen to, and like really, 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 really nice to have when you're just kind of punching people.
Yeah, and this is when you actually look back now, this is the game where everything came together.
Yes.
And that's why, even if it took a while for the franchise to become popular over here, it took until 2017, which is when it came out over here.
Yeah.
For this series to hit, because it was so niche. And for reference, this series, sales wise, is as big as Persona, which says something. I don't know if
it's
Persona,
very, very popular in the West now than it was before.
I don't know if it's Persona or Shin Megami Tensei in general, overall, but the point still stands. Is that shows how niche it's been, and then it's just exploded over here in the last few years.
Yeah.
Because they finally got over to translating them all. But that's why all the memes. You always get the popular memes from the popular games. Like, from this series, you get the Dame Dame, the door kick from One.
Yeah, the door kick from One.
That's rad.
Yeah, that's rad. You get
the punching the table, even though I cannot unsee that scene without the flying chair now.
Yeah, you get so much stuff.
Yeah, it's just so many things, and it's where everything came together, because most games either had good story, good combat, good side content, or some of them they didn't tick all the boxes. This game, everything clicked finally. And
and that's why if you talk to people who have played Yakuza, Zero is a game that nearly every single Yakuza fan in the West has played. Because it's like the first one that really, really took off, and it wasn't until like the remasters and the other versions of the other games started coming out before people played those ones. Zero is like the game that everyone who likes Yakuza has played.
And part of the thing that we've not mentioned is it's a prequel, and it's the most perfect prequel to have.
Yeah.
It doesn't contradict anything, it builds upon it, and it treats it as if it doesn't treat the player as if they're dumb. It just goes, go and have fun. These characters are the characters. Just enjoy it. Like, it doesn't try to dump loads of stuff of lore, of like the Tojo families. It just gives you little bits. It gives you what's necessary. It's not like other prequels like Star Wars or Kingdom Hearts or Final Crisis Core, where they dump and retcon and so on. This game just goes...
They change major parts about the story or the characters or whoever it is to fit in.
Yeah, this game just...
One thing that's always great about the Yakuza games is the characters rarely need to change to match the story, because the stories are always... personal, but based around what's happening to the characters rather than like an entire universal world building or anything like that.
I would argue
compared
that.
to other RPG style games, they're very, very much a story based around like a one clan of Yakuza in Japan, which in the grand scheme of things is actually quite tiny comparatively to what a lot of RPGs have, where it's your actions will affect every single world in this universe or whatever.
Yeah, like this game, just it works as well as a one-off. It works well as tied into the rest of the series. It works well as a pre. It works well as playing this as backstory as well and everything.
Yeah.
Like,
And if you only play Zero in all the Yakuza games, it's probably the best game you could play.
yeah, and it does. And I don't think I think a couple of games reach the bar of Zero, but
Yeah.
that's just the luck of games. Sometimes it
Yeah.
just all comes together, and like the question of the title, what makes Yakuza Zero a masterpiece is literally just every little thing that the series has nailed coming together as one like culmination.
Yeah. It's widely considered probably the best Yakuza game out of all of them by most fans of the series.
Yeah, like if you get hundreds of hours of content and so on, it's just, and this isn't even in the era where hours of content equals good, because you played 20 hours.
Yeah, I only played through the story with only the side content I ran into.
And
I only did about 15% of the game in terms of the completion stuff. But I still had such a great experience with this game, and it's it's like very hard to not see why people who do spend like 500 hours playing through Yakuza 0 spend that time playing through Yakuza 0, because there is that much content, and all of it, even like just chilling in Kamurocho, going to the bowling alley and just chilling, everything feels very, very personal because of how Kiryu or Majima reacts to every situation or has conversations with people. We mentioned earlier about the kind of Kiryu going, "That's rad." That's what Kiryu says when he sees a new fighting style, and Kiryu is genuinely interested in nearly everything you throw at him, because he wants to know. He's interested. He doesn't understand, and it's one of the things that makes his character and Majima's character so interesting, because when they don't understand, they are more willing to learn than anything else. Half of the stuff that random people do in their like universe, and that's what Zero brings together over some of the other games in the series.
Absolutely. Do you think that's a good place to call it?
I think so. I think we've covered everything that you wanted to cover, I think.
Yeah, that's been a good one. Would you be down for another one at some point on other ones?
Yeah, I will be down for another one.
I need to replay like Kiwami through. I just need to replay all other games of the Yakuza franchise before I actually talk about them, because they're not as vivid in my brain.
Yeah, I think I might need to have another look through some of the other games to have a reminder, because Zero, I'm not sure if it's because Zero was my first Yakuza game or the fact, but I'm pretty sure it's because I'm pretty sure it's a combination of the fact it was my first game and the fact it was such a good game, is that I haven't actually really touched Zero since I finished it about 3.5 months ago. And I can still remember everything from that game in terms of all the story stuff.
Yeah,
because it's all
memorable.
very, very good and very, very like memorable. But then when it comes to other games in the series, I've only remembered a lot of stuff I remember from 3 through speedrunning it, because I've
done it multiple times.
The story multiple times now. Even though I don't exactly play through the story, I know what I'm.
Yeah.
I know the story that I'm in based on characters I'm fighting or talking to.
I would agree on that, because 3 was my first one. I still remember a lot of that, even though it's 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It just sticks with
Yeah.
you. Yeah, so I think we'll call it there then. Yeah, that was a good talk, and yeah, thank you all for listening. This will be on YouTube at some point. Thanks for watching.